So if you're brand new to using Ableton Live, this video is going to give you a basic introduction to the interface so you can understand how to navigate the software. Currently right now, you can get my Ableton Live 11 Basics course completely for free on Skillshare for 30 days using the link in the video description down below. Let's not waste any time and jump straight into taking a look at the Ableton Live interface. There are two different workspaces within Ableton Live. There is Session View, which we're currently in right now, and there's also Arrangement View. If you click Tab on your keyboard, you can seamlessly switch between both of these. Alternatively, you can use your mouse and manually switch between them over here. Session View gives you convenient access to all of your clips, which is perfect for live performance. Whereas in Arrangement View, you get a more traditional digital audio workstation layout. You've got your timeline and you can record horizontally all of your different parts. At the top of Ableton Live, we have got our transport controls. Things like play, stop, and also record. Now currently when I'm recording, you can see inside of Arrangement View, nothing is currently happening. It's just ticking away and not recording any audio or any MIDI information. That's because you need to manually record arm a track. Now you can do that just by simply clicking the record arm button. Now when you click record, this will go ahead and begin recording something onto whichever track you have chosen. Currently, if we try to record arm multiple tracks at the same time, it will automatically toggle the record arm off of the previous track, meaning you can only record one track at a time. Now, what you could do is you could hold down Command on your keyboard and then click. And this will allow you to select multiple tracks and arm them. Alternatively, you could right click onto the record arm button and turn arm exclusivity off. This will now let you, without holding down Command, turn your track record arms on freely wherever you wish. At this current time, these MIDI tracks are completely useless. If we were to go ahead and try and record a piano part with my MIDI keyboard, nothing would happen because we don't have any form of virtual instruments loaded into these tracks. To go ahead and add instruments or audio effects to your tracks, you're going to want to access the browser. Now, if you see this little arrow in the top left corner, if you click this, this will open up the Ableton Live browser, which will let you take a look at all of the different categories of things you may wish to use. So you've got your audio effects, MIDI effects, you've got your MIDI sounds, drum sounds, very well organized. Additionally as well, you also have some pre-created clips that you can just simply drag and drop onto your session view if you wanted to create a live performance really quickly. You can use a shortcut to access the browser, which is Command Option B. This will both open and also close the browser. I'm going to go ahead and add an instrument to my MIDI track. There's two ways that we could do this. The first way would be by just browsing the instrument categories and finding what you need, or you could simply search for it. So we could go ahead and search for a grand piano, and that will give us access to those particular sounds. Now we could go ahead and drag and drop this sound onto our desired track, or we could just double click and it will load it in onto the selected track. Let's focus back onto the transport controls and this top left corner. Here you have instant access to the overall BPM of your track. You can just select on it and then type in the desired tempo. Alternatively, you could tap it in by using this button to the left-hand side. You then have access to your time signature, whether it's in 4/4, 3/4, 7/8, whatever it is you need. You then have your metronome that you can toggle on and also toggle off. If you use this drop-down menu, you can change the characteristics of your metronome. You can decide whether it has a count in or not, whether it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, and then recording of a clip would begin, or whether it just starts straight away. You can also determine the sound of the metronome, whether it's classic, click, or wood. You can change the rhythm, so whether it counts like 1, 2, 3, 4, which is pretty standard, or if you want it to count in subdivisions like 16th notes or 8th notes, so it counts more like 1 E and a 2 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a. Very useful if you are a drummer. Focusing back onto our tracks, by default, Ableton Live will always load in 2 MIDI tracks and also 2 audio tracks. Now currently on our audio track channel strips, you can see we have all of these options down below to choose which audio source we're actually recording from our audio interface, the monitoring status of that, as well as the end destination of where that audio is being outputted to. Now currently everything is grayed out. On the MIDI channel you can see these are yellow and we can change the monitoring status. Whereas on here, everything is gray. Well, that is because we need to choose our audio interface. Currently, Ableton Live has not detected my audio interface that I have connected. And if it's your very first time using Ableton Live, you will need to head into the preferences. So to set up an audio interface, you're going to want to go over to the control bar and head into your preferences. Inside of here, you now have access to the sort of global parameters of Ableton Live. You can add your audio devices, choose the sample rate, the latency, the buffer rate, all that type of stuff. You can also mess about with the MIDI parameters if you have any MIDI devices connected, and a whole load of different things. We want to choose my audio interface, so we need to go to my audio input device and choose the Allen & Heath QU16. And we're going to go to my output device and choose that as well to be the Allen & Heath QU16, which is the current audio interface mixer that I have connected to my Apple device. You can then take this one step further and go into the input configuration and decide which inputs you want to be enabled and also disabled. The more inputs that you turn on, the more stress it will apply to your CPU. So if you're on a very old computer, you may wish to only choose the inputs that you are using in particular. So if you're only using like inputs 1 through to 6, that will reduce the load on your CPU, increasing the performance. Same is true for the output configuration. You can go ahead and choose which inputs you want to use. You can disable the ones that you don't want to use. And again, the more of these that are on and enabled, the more stress it will apply to your CPU limiter. On the topic of monitoring your CPU performance, in the transport controls in the top right corner, we have got a live feed of the current CPU usage of Ableton Live. Right now, it's sort of idling around 10% usage, but as we gradually increase the amount of audio tracks, the amount of audio effects, current MIDI effects and MIDI tracks we are using, this CPU load will probably increase to be around 50% to 60% usage. And if you start to exceed up to 80% usage, this will give you a good warning to know, right, I should maybe change some things about my Ableton Live set to avoid it from crashing and make sure it's safe. On the topic of increasing your CPU load and adding more audio and MIDI tracks, how do you go about doing that? Well, there's two ways you can add audio tracks and also MIDI tracks. You can right click and just simply choose Insert Audio Track, and you can right click and just put Insert MIDI Track, or alternatively, you could use the shortcut that is presented here. As you can see when I right click, it gives us a very convenient shortcut, which is very useful for learning the software. So if I just do Command T, this will let me just continuously add audio tracks super quick. And you can see in the top right corner how that CPU load is freaking out a little bit. And likewise, if I do Command Shift T, that will let me add a whole bunch of MIDI tracks. We have now went ahead and created up to 81 tracks inside of Ableton Live. And it's really important that we now focus on how we organize these tracks. So if you're recording something crazy like an orchestral performance or a live performance, just creating 81 tracks with the default title of MIDI or audio is going to be extremely confusing. Now, if you just choose the channel strip that you wish to rename and click Command R, this will allow you to have quick access to renaming this track. And we could type in like, guitar, for example, if this was capturing a guitar. Obviously, it's not because it's a MIDI track, but for demonstration purposes. An additional way to rename a track is by right-clicking on the channel strip and going down to Rename. Obviously, this takes a little bit longer, but it works. If you are recording something like a live drum kit that's got a whole load of microphones that are all part of the same instrument, you're going to want to group your audio tracks together. So let's say, for example, all of these audio tracks were actually being used to mic up and record an acoustic drum kit. We could go ahead and obviously be like, right, this is the kick, and then rename the next one and go, this is the snare, and so on. But then if we wanted to make a global adjustment to the overall volume of our drum kit, we would have to individually, turn down the kick and then match that to the snare and then go, right, it's turned down the hi-hats now. It's very, very time consuming. So we need to create some form of a master slider for this group of microphones. So if we click on our kick, hold down Shift and go all the way up to the audio tracks we need to select, and then we right click, we can group these tracks together. Or you could use the shortcut Command G. This will now place all of these audio tracks inside of a subfolder that you can both close and also open. This once again streamlines your setup because everything's now got its own channel strip, but we now have a global fader for these drum tracks. So everything inside of this group will be turned down to the same level and also be turned up. So it's just a master slider for whatever has been pre-programmed inside of here. And we can rename this group as well and say this is the drums. Now let's say our drums are red. We can actually change the color of this channel strip. So if we right click, we can go, right, our drums are red, so this channel strip is also going to be red, which is very useful if you're quite visual with the way you perceive information. If you want to learn more about Ableton Live 11 with videos just like this, don't forget to check out the link in the description for 30 days free of Skillshare Premium, where you can stream my Ableton Live 11 Basics course, taking you through the entire process of creating a song from start to finish inside of Ableton Live. If you enjoyed today's video, give it a thumbs up and also consider subscribing for more videos just like this every single week.